Hi, it's Saturday, February 24th, 2024. This is Dr. Lauren Kaczynski, and today is day 23 of 33 of my 33-day YouTube video challenge. Wow, so I just was looking through photographs from the end of the first year after I'd left my academic job, so 2015 through the fall of 2016 and into 2016, really in this time frame where the buildup for starting the seed house was happening. And I'd kind of forgotten how much stuff I was working on at one time. So by the end of 2015, it was pretty clear that things weren't going to take any meaningful shape at this academic institution being vice chair of surgery. And the comment that I got was really that it was ahead of its time. It was too early an idea. And that seemed right. And I also knew that I didn't have a portfolio of experience that was going to make me a credible contender for that. It was really all on the strength of this powerful regional chair of surgery's idea that I had something different to bring to the table, which is true, I do. But it was going to be a little bit of a different proposition how to make that relevant to other people. During this time, I'd been living in New York City with the man that I was involved with who I'd met on the Camino. There was trouble in paradise. He had businesses in a few different places, and New York was kind of in the middle, but his main operation was on the eastern shore of Maryland, and this is where he had done the renovation of the historic mill. That was a hard proposition to get out of because renovation costs had been a lot higher than the value of the building, and so he was servicing a mortgage, and really that was his home base and had been for a long time. And I think through his divorce, it hadn't really been clear how much he was or wasn't going to want to be there. It's really a pretty small community, and I'm sure he had in mind how he was going to rebuild an intimate life for himself. But this was not a place that on its surface appealed to me at all. And it's an interesting community. I hadn't really spent time. I mean, formally it's below the Mason-Dixon line. And the town itself has a pretty cute, tiny historic neighborhood that, well, I'm sure it's doing better now, but it wasn't really cultivated to the extent that it could be. There were a few nice homes, older homes that had been restored, but then there was a lot of stuff that just was kind of run down, and there wasn't a lot to recommend the town. It was sort of a little bit of a bedroom community for people from Philadelphia or Baltimore or Washington, D.C. But it also took me a long time to understand what was going on there, because in addition to the town itself being sort of poor in Kent County, this was in Kent County, which is the least populous and the poorest county in Maryland, it also had still a lot of segregation. It wasn't that there was open stuff happening, but all of the Black population seemed to be concentrated in little towns that were sort of satellites around some of the bigger communities, and they had names like Butlertown. So that says a lot about what was happening. And you didn't see people of color in the town itself at all. I mean, I remember seeing a mixed race woman in one of the art gallery stores one time, and I was like, I felt like I was in a big city again. It was that startling. So that was the place. Now, what I learned over time is that it's also a place of really divergent wealth. So a lot of people live in almost like plantations, really grand estates that were riverfront properties that you can't see from the road. You know, I don't know. It just wasn't obvious to me what the appeals of the place were. It was mostly an agricultural community. And at the time, I think I'd mentioned that the guy that I was involved with was the CFO for a psychological services organization that worked in multiple states. But one of the businesses that they ran or were managing was they had a contract with a local Center for Adults with Intellectual Disabilities. So this was a residential program that also was under review a lot, not really thriving, and it wasn't really in the same line as the rest of the services that were offered, which mostly had to do with pretty severe psychological illnesses and medication and residential support treatment plans. But this place was interesting for a lot of reasons, but my partner was interested in trying to turn it, well, first of all, he wanted it to financially succeed, but he also saw it as an opportunity to kind of leave his mark on things a little bit differently. So it had an unused kitchen, and we had an idea that we could start to serve meals to the staff and to the participants, the residents and day program participants of this center, and that it would be a way to help build community, also be a way to address well-being through through nutrition, through what people were being fed, because of course this had been in the back of my mind and something I was working on for myself for quite a while. So there were a lot of different ideas about how that could work. And at the time, my brother was looking for an opportunity to get out of working in doing tavern food in Wisconsin to being more of an institutional chef. And he was CIA trained, but he had a lot of issues of his own that had interfered with his professional development. And so we thought this would be a way to solve a lot of problems. And so we relocated him, and then had under this umbrella organization that I was developing, Canopy, the idea that we would run this food service and occupational education program. So this was in development. I had finished in that year my yoga teacher training, and then, which was a 200-hour training, and then I took another 200-hour kind of integrative health training. And I've mentioned before this Urban Zen program and how that got me on the Camino, and I'd known about this before any of this other stuff had happened because of the yoga teaching there. And so that was going on. I was working on this suite of software build out. So I saw lots of pictures today of whiteboards with different conversations I was having both remotely, and then this former patient who was a consultant had come to visit and work on that with us in Maryland. I started to talk with an attorney about different elements of protecting the intellectual property. And so all of those things were going on, and then this seed house proposition came up too. In my mind about this wasn't just this test case of a center where there were bringing together multiple healing arts providers, but also trying to create an environment that supported our well-being in the ways that we want to support patients. So that was all in there. But I'd also had this thing in the back of my mind that's almost a bigger vision. I mean, this was sort of on par with Canopy. And that was that I had been in my adolescence in a county, Marin County, north of San Francisco, where there had been historically Portuguese and Italian dairy farmers and ranchers. Those businesses went into decline at some point in the 80s. And a land trust was developed, and there was one younger generation dairy farmer, a woman named Laura Strauss, who finally this land trust was able to make a bridge with and to suggest there might be a different way to do the agricultural business here that secures the future, is more lucrative, but also works in trust with protecting this environment. And she ended up developing a very successful organic dairy. And then a lot of other things followed from that. But I could see then how coming in with a vision about how to take things to a next level in terms of agricultural activities could also define and protect a community. And this became kind of a food destination. I mean, it was always a beautiful place. It was on Point Reyes National Seashore. There were lots of things to do. You could kayak, you could bicycle, you could horseback ride, you could hike. I'd spent a lot of time there. And in fact, even earlier had lived on Tamales Bay itself. So I thought, why couldn't something like this happen in Kent County? And there were beginnings of it. There were some beginnings of organic farming and things like that. And another woman who had a small holding and was also doing and selling ferments that she made from things that she grew. So there was stuff going on in this way. And I started to look into all of that. And as I imagined the seed house as a hub of sorts for both healing arts, but good eating, good food, and making this place be a destination for wellness, which makes sense. Because in many ways there were things that were beautiful about it as well. And it was really only about 90 minutes from 3 major metropolitan areas. So it wasn't so easy to get to. There wasn't public transportation. You had to cross a bridge and so on. And at the center of this then was this building that I said that I had always really liked. I mean, I had a feeling when I walked into it about what a special place it was. And so beginning in the spring of 2016, I'd started to talk with other people in the community, particularly these 2 women who had come to look at it with a thought of whether they wanted to organize a healing arts center and an herbal apothecary there. And it just started a bunch of discussion. And my partner was interested in this. It's not, I have to say in retrospect, it's still not 100% clear to me what he wanted, because there was a lot of complaining about things along the way too, or sort of not really supporting or endorsing things. He had a much more conventional outlook on stuff. And so it was a little hard to resolve some of that tension, but you know, that's life. So anyway, this was all in the mix. And then also percolating in the back, because now I'm 1 year out, 2015, then coming into 2016, I'm almost 2 years out of my clinical practice. And one of my friends said, "Hey, Lauren, you know, you're not going to be able to get back in." And I was like, "What do you mean?" I mean, I'd been looking at different possibilities, but I hadn't found the right thing that was going to let all of this happen together and keep my relationship intact. That's how I saw it at the time. And it never occurred to me, because I'd been doing this for 25 years or something, that I would lose the possibility of doing it because I had some time off. And was working on things that I thought were still credible. I'd maintained all my board certifications. I was still maintained all of my memberships and so on. So I was still really engaged, but that's all what was on the table as we came into the fall of 2016. So I'd for 6 months been sourcing materials and beginning to plan what this space might be like. And basically the vision was of having shared workspace, that there'd be some practitioner treatment rooms that could create a central place for people to be able to schedule clients. There were a lot of massage therapists working out of their mom's house and things like that. There wasn't, when I'd gone and had services, even some that were pretty good, pretty high quality services, where they were being delivered wasn't really so inspired. It didn't feel like a nice outing for me. But so this was one idea, that we might be able to put this together. And then because there was this idea about an herbal apothecary and having a front door for some of that, there was an idea about serving tea as one way of introducing people to the healing properties of plants and a familiar vehicle. But nobody was very interested in doing a kind of cafe or serving that. But I also didn't see a way to make a tea room that didn't make money. So it seemed to me we also had to do coffee, and that we might have to do some food. I'd been interested in juicing. We looked very closely at how to make a line of juices and again, use the bounty of where we were. And then there was an annex on this building that was like a big barn. It was such a fantastic space. And it had been cut up into small offices that had open ceilings. So it was sort of shared workspace, but not. We took all of that out and made it a yoga studio, which really became a sanctuary. And as that construction got underway, really the construction started in February of 2017. Everything started to fall in place in a way that this building and the prospect of what could be there was just lit me up. I mean, I was pretty excited about it. I still didn't really understand how I was going to bring all the parts together, because like I was looking and evaluating, could I put a practice in here? Could I put an endoscopy suite? And again, having these conversations with some of the referring or people that I would refer to if I had complications, because it wasn't really clear to me that the services that were available in town No, I'm going to say this differently. It was very clear to me that the services that were available in town were nothing like anything that I wanted to be a part of. So this was one of the challenges too. It's not uncommon in a small place, but it was difficult. So I'm still on that quest, trying to figure out how to get that piece in, but then very excited about all the movement that's happening in these other places. And of course, each of them, I mean, the Center for Adults with Intellectual Ability, and that project was called Kent House Kitchen, was this occupational training and food service operation was one thing. There was family dynamics in that. There was me and my partner. There was him and his boss and that business. I mean, there was a lot going on with that just by itself. And yeah. And then there was me with my own progress through yoga teacher training and trying to learn more about integrative practices and how to feel better myself. Like, could I convince myself or have experiences that made me have more confidence that there was something to be said for some of these complementary practices? And how was I going to negotiate these sharing of patients and information with people in this building? I mean, I'd come up with two basic rules, which were that nobody could claim that they cured cancer. That was one thing. I think that was the main thing, that they just had to not say that they were curing things, because I don't say that either. And I wasn't sure what my liability and things was going to be as a physician now licensed in the state and then the director of this interesting center. So there were just things like that to work out. And then we had the shared workspace component of it, the cafe component of it, learning and choosing how to make coffee and what to get, and outfitting and building a kitchen that passed the inspection for having a food service operation going on there. And I was doing a little bit of retail in that space too. I think I had said before. And then the yoga studio, and having recruiting people to be teaching there and how to set up. We're going to have a membership model. We're going to have just drop-in classes. How are we going to do all of this? And of course, there were other people in town who were already doing some of these things in ways that they were more or less happy with. And so there was all of that. And so that was really the genesis of the Seed House, and kind of all that was on my plate. Seeing those photographs today, I guess I'm a little astonished by how much energy I had to be spinning on these different ideas. I mean, again, I suppose that what was cohering for me was this idea that in order to make all of this work, that there might have to be this umbrella organization and a way that these different moving parts related to and supported one another. I mean, that's certainly how I configured it in the Seed House itself, that I didn't see any one component of what was there paying the rent. But I could see that one thing might feed another, that people might come for yoga and they might buy a juice afterwards, or that people who were coming to see a psychotherapist or a massage practitioner might buy a book or a journaling notebook, or they might come to an intuitive journaling workshop. They might come to learn meditation practice. Eventually, we had a Buddhist priest in training who offered a meditation practice and established a sangha and used our space for that. And I was also in this interesting place between living in a very poor county in some ways, but also with a wealthy population, how to bridge that discrepancy in what was offered. So school teachers might not be able to afford to come to yoga classes at $20 a crack several times a week, or even once a week. I mean, we had a community yoga practice, but it was just, there was a lot going on. There was a lot to think about and to work on. And I could see why I had all these things going on. And it was a little bit like those performers who have sticks with spinning plates on them, and you're running around trying to keep this big plate spinning on everything. But I will say, just in closing for this, that as the Seed House was coming together, like the oak floor had been laid in the yoga studio, and the walls weren't painted yet. And I'd come back from that Being with Dying workshop at Upaya Zen Center in Santa Fe. And I just had such a strong feeling about what was possible. And I'd written in pencil over the door, partly because I knew that there was a habit for construction workers of leaving a signature or something, a coin or something in the building when you were working on a job site. That was sort of a tradition, a way of leaving your mark. And what I wrote over the door well, I have to decide how to include this in the video. What I wrote over the door was, "The Awakened Heart Hospital for Wounded Healers." And I can remember lying down on the floor in the yoga studio when there wasn't anybody there yet and feeling it. It seemed so audacious in a way, but it also seemed like such a sweet wish, really. And I guess this is it in a way, isn't it? What's kind of at the heart of all of this is that somehow it felt closer to being or becoming the doctor that I imagined and making my contribution, leaving my penny in the wall. Yeah. Well, there's the big unravel. And it explains also why I stayed and worked so hard on things, even as things were really not okay for me personally. And I guess what I'll have to say in the next video is that I found myself, after a couple of years into this, kind of having replicated a lot of what I did in surgery in terms of how what sort of energy I put out and where I tied together loose ends, what I felt like was on my shoulders versus how to share that out in some way that took better care of me. It was a little bit shocking because here I was in the middle of a healing arts center, and in some ways I still wasn't taking good care of myself. Well, anyway, so as you can see, there's more to the story. And I look forward to sharing it. Yeah, truly.